Devil, my friend,
Oh, yeah.
I think if there's anybody who would know hot things, it's you.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's only right that you let our beloved Fangs know what they can order now, courtesy of Coney Island.
Oh, yeah, man. We're in the kitchen. You know it gets hot in the kitchen. And what else better for your finger foods, for your tacos, for your victims that you may be eating? Maybe some sauce. And you should get it from the sauce boss. Coney Island sauce. Oh, yeah. Get some of that good stuff. Oh, yeah. You like to sprinkle it on anything. You could sprinkle it on your fingers. Sprinkle it on your toes. Sprinkle it on your hose. Anything you want to sprinkle goes.
Absolutely. We have partnered with Coney Island Saucery. Aaron is fantastic. We really appreciate all the love he's given to the show, and we're very, very pleased and honored to be a part of him. So he's got 4 sauces out of various heat levels to enjoy on all your various foods, but also for anybody who is already following his socials, our socials, or is about to be, newly announced partnership with Slayer.
Oh yeah.
Coney Island
burning to fire.
Oh yeah, Coney Island Saucery does have a Slayer brand hot sauce coming out very, very soon. And so make sure that you check that out for all your various levels of spice. This is Vampire and the Devil, Coney Island Saucery. Horns up, fangs out. Right there, ghouls, fiends, fangs, and infernos. You know what Vampire says? You know what Devil says? It's time to get a little weird as we are going to bring to you, what do you say, my friend? Let's go back to the future, back to the past, back to the up, back to the down, back to the upside down. I think it's time for that time loop showdown.
Oh, yeah, we're doing a little bit of horror, trying to figure out what genres we can kind of push into the second season, different categories of horror movies. And it's like, mostly time loop movies, the time warps, the time, traveling and all that stuff usually tends to be science fiction, maybe a little bit of comedy, like Back to the Future and stuff like that. But there are a lot of good horror elements of the time traveling, time loop, genre. So, we're like, hey man, what's cooler than having to kill somebody multi-million times or, or kill yourself 19 million times. I mean, Groundhog's Day is probably one of the essential time loop movies, and apparently in that movie he killed himself like they said like 7 billion times because he ended up being in that loop for like they said it was like 1,000,000 years or something ridiculous.
Yeah, dude.
So it's like yeah, why not get a little crazy, a little kooky, and do some time traveling ourselves and talk a little bit about some horror stuff.
Absolutely, for sure, man. So we're going to start with you Fangs and Infernos in 2017. Then we're going to find ourselves in the past as we take you back to 2007 as we pit 2017's Happy Death Day up against 2007's TimeCrimes. And it's going to be an interesting one, my friend, but why don't we start off current? We'll start off with a little bit of Happy Death Day. It's a movie that I always really enjoyed. I thought both of the movies honestly were a lot of fun because there is a sequel, but we're going to keep it about the first one. And it's just kind of cool. Basically, it's about this girl in college who, frankly, she's just kind of a shit human being, She's like, it's not that she's all that wretched per se. It's not like she's a serial killer or something, but she's just a bitch. She's just that, like, I'm better than everybody, like, kind of like daddy pays for everything. I'm the head cheerleader, nobody's good enough for me, and I'm a blessing for everybody else kind of person. And then all of a sudden, she just starts getting offed by this person in a baby mask and wakes up right back in bed at the start of the day, wondering what happened, just to get offed by a person in a baby mask, and wakes up in bed.
Yeah.
And starts the day again, just to get, well, you get the idea.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, this movie, like, I mean, as far as like, the time looping, time traveling, I mean, this movie right here just starts off where you already know what kind of movie you're going to go into. Because if you're paying attention to the very beginning of the intro, the boom, 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 the Universal, I think, or whatever logo it was, it literally repeats itself a couple times over again during the intro of it. And it's like, wait, what the hell is the DVD skipping? Like, is my movie
Right.
skipping or whatever like that? I'm like, oh wait, this is a time loop movie, so it's kind of funny that they replay that over again, and then and you're like, what the hell is going on? But yeah, I thought that was a cool like movies like Back to the Future and all of them have always done these time loops, but no one's ever really done that to an intro to a movie already. So it's like you're already starting off with like that, and then the cool thing about with the trailer, where the trailer to begin with, in the for the movie they were playing the 50 Cent's "Go Shorty, It's Your Birthday," but apparently they didn't secure the rights to be able to do that, so they had to choose different music, which I thought would have been kind of cool if they would have been able to keep using that, just because it's one of those songs that, like, yeah, I don't mind it, but yeah, if you had to hear it multiple times, you probably would just like wake up and smash your phone like as soon as you wake up.
Oh yeah, no. If I had to hear that song multiple times, I would kill multiple people.
Yeah. It's like the Groundhog's Day, like, hey, it's 7 wake up. And you're like, oh my God. And they're playing the same song over again. That would drive me crazy. But yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's your typical, time loop movie, like you said, she's being, killed, being stalked by this person that we don't know who's in a baby mask, which is kind of cool because it's like the mascot for the college that she's going to too. So
Mhm.
like everybody walking around during this like college time is all wearing this mask. So it's like, well, yeah, now I got to try to figure out which one of these people are doing it. Yeah, and it's just like, it gets to the point where it's like every time she wakes up and you do it again, you're like, oh my God. When you're watching it too, it's like, oh my God, it's like it's annoying just a little bit to watch it. I wouldn't imagine going through that all the time. But then again, with that, she does what I probably would have done, which is just be like, just start going and doing shit like crazy shit. Like she brings out a pillow for the guy who falls down all the time. She's like, people don't believe her, so she's like, oh yeah, and boom, the sprinklers are gonna go. Okay, then this thing's gonna do that, and that's gonna do that. You know what I mean? It's like I would just be like, if I'm gonna be stuck in this loop all over again, I might as well have a little bit of fun.
Yeah, dude, she walks out of the dorm room at one point just completely naked.
Yeah.
She's just like, yeah, I'm just gonna like live this up, because that's at a point where she starts realizing that this is a thing and that somebody's out to get her and somebody's going to kill her, but she doesn't really understand the reason why. She doesn't really see why she's like a target. And the other thing that's funny is because she's, known as this just heinous bitch, when she starts kind of reaching out for help, like the guy who kind of ultimately becomes the love interest, he's kind of like, why are you like even talking to me? Like 10 minutes ago you were laughing at me and like, figuratively, shoving me in a locker, figuratively speaking. But like, you never treated me with any respect. I'm just a peon in your eyes, and now you want my help. So at first it's kind of like, wait, what? How is this a thing? And then, waking up with, the person in the area and just then trying to get things going. But then, yeah, as she starts realizing that, okay, I'm kind of immortal while I'm figuring this out. And that's where that great comedy you were talking about comes into, where, puts the pillow under the guy that always falls. And she's like, boom, sirens, boom, sprinkler, cheerleading pyramid falls down, or whatever it may be. But the one thing I also like about that particular sequence is it leads into an actually semi-vital part of the movie, which is the fact that actually she's not immortal. And there is actually, it's like the cat with 9 lives. Like, you can do a lot if you've got 9 lives, but you still only have 9 of them. Where with her, she's, basically kind of going after this mascot, baby killer kind of a thing, knowing that she can't really be touched. So she's a little bit reckless, but also a little bit, determined as well. But then she starts realizing that she's having like genuine, like, bodily issues, like organ failure kind of thing, issues with her head, internal bleeding. Like, the more that the baby killer gets her, the harder it is actually for her to start continuing the pursuit, because she's really starting to have these physical ailments.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, and it's kind of cool, I mean, it's like, with this, serial killer kind of, story back line, I mean, just imagine, some of the people in Friday the 13th, or, Michael Myers, and being able to know, he kills you, and then you wake up in the morning, you're like, okay, that was weird. And then all of a sudden, you go your day and Michael Myers kills you again. Then eventually you're like, okay, I know this motherfucker's going to pop out over here. I'll wait for him behind him and I'll get him before he gets me. And that's what she kind of like says. I'm going to put, take this and try to like, beat it in. She thinks it's this, this, lunatic psychiatric guy that like broke out of this like hospital. She thinks that he's the killer. So she assumes that she's going after him, and she's trying to like get him before he can get her kind of thing. And it's just like, like you said, she eventually realizes, okay, I need to figure this out. I'm going at it wrong. I gotta figure all this stuff like that. And like, to be honest though, it's kind of funny though, because the whole entire time you're doing this, there's always little clues that basically almost pretty much tell you who the killer it really is throughout the whole entire movie, and you don't really realize that, and she doesn't really catch up onto it until like later on in the movie. She still thinks it's this killer and stuff like that, and she gets the killer, and her and the man are like finally going, and she wakes up in the morning and she does it again, and it's that day again. She's like, well, what the hell, man? Like, I didn't get killed. All I ate was this cupcake, and realizes that, the cupcake is the poisoned, and it was her roommate the whole entire time. And basically her roommate just couldn't stand her because she's just, like, she's one of those, she's in the sorority. So she's one of those sorority girls that just walks all over everybody and treats everybody like shit. And eventually, she kind of, after being killed so many times, she starts to figure out, like, maybe I'm not the greatest person in the world anymore.
Yeah. And there ultimately is kind of a moral to this story, but it's also because, like, not only does her roommate just thoroughly despise her, again, because she's just wretched, but like, she was sleeping with, like, the roommate's like love interest, like the person that, like, she really wanted to get with. And and because Miss Thing could do whatever she felt she wanted, that included just get anybody she wanted, for the betterment of grades or play or just whatever. But yeah, ultimately it centers around this birthday cupcake, and that's what ultimately was killing her. And then every time she kind of avoided it is when the roommate had to like take her out to start it all over again to try to get her, to do this. But ultimately she sends her roommate for a long walk off a short pier.
Yeah. That was the cool thing about this movie too. Like, even with all the deaths and like every time that she would die and stuff like that, there was some really cool, like, just some cool deaths in this movie and stuff like that. I mean, I even like the part where she figures it out, but her boyfriend, the guy that she kind of likes, dies, and she's like, "Oh shit, I can't let it end like this, because if it ends like this, then he's dead and not in this world. So she's like, screw it, and like jumps off the top of like a building or something, like, kills herself a couple different ways and stuff like that, where she's just like, wakes up in the morning, and of course it's like the same thing, like you said, you say, hey, how you doing, you're up already, kind of thing. And it's just like, oh my god, yeah. I mean, it just, and then you have that little, the comedy, little comedy aspects of it, like with the roommate coming in all the time, like, hey, did you hit that? And he was like, she's like still right there and stuff like that throughout it. So it's just the little comedy aspects of that and stuff like that. But I like that. I like the way that they're, you know kind of like you said, it's kind of like, Groundhog's Day, but with a serial killer aspect to it. Basically, really is it's a good way to like explain this movie for anybody who hasn't seen it. It literally is just Groundhog's Day meets Halloween, or some,
Yeah.
or like, any kind of 80s, killer roommate.
Yeah, masked killer kind of thing. Yeah, no, it definitely is, and it's also kind of cool too, because it actually takes me back to movies like Urban Legend, which I really like too, because as far as like the closeness of the killer, like in reality, where you find out that the killer, in similar fashion, is the reason that she's the killer is to get payback on, a prank gone wrong kind of a thing. And I'm not going to go into overly too much detail, just in case, which I wouldn't be surprised, but just in case Urban Legend, falls into something that we do. I'm not going to go into too much detail when it comes to that. But ultimately, the killer of Urban Legend is, is getting revenge off a prank gone wrong that fucked up her life, or it's just kind of the way that it works when it comes to that. So anyway, it's just kind of cool when it comes to that. And I liked the idea of that, where, she's just as pissed off as a roommate, because, like, she watches her just be horrible to people and get what she wants, because she can just do what she wants, and, exacts a little bit of revenge. So that's something that I always thought was pretty cool. But as we pop into the obituaries for this one, because this one was an ultimately, very straightforward design, unlike the next one we're about to talk about. With holy fuck, there's a lot to digest when it comes to that one. But when it comes to Happy Death Day, when it comes to the obituaries, for me, I'll keep this really, really short and sweet. I like this movie a lot. I think it's a unique concept simply for what it's portraying. Like you said, the two aspects per se they're not new. It's Groundhog Day, it's things repeating, and a masked, killer, two things that we all can appreciate. So the concept is a unique one as far as the execution, the design of the movie, and I like the way they integrated certain things. They integrated, a good amount of comedy, but also like serious tones as well, where she's having this kind of like come to Jesus feel. And I know you're not too keen on that guy, but it's just the way that it is for this this type of explanation. Is she just kind of has like that that meeting where she realizes that she has to be a better person, assuming she even gets out of this alive, not just again, but forever. But a lot of also just like fun comedy. It's good life lessons. It's got that fun comedy, like coming out naked for no reason, laying down a pillow for a guy is about to fall. Just little stuff like that. It's kooky, it's fun, but it's a well executed movie. I like the actors and the actresses in it. I think it's well acted. It's definitely got a budget behind it. You can definitely tell, it had a proper theatrical release. That's where I saw it, and it's cool. It had some money behind it, and it shows. But overall, I did think it was a solid concept. I like the movie a lot. I've always enjoyed it. And I watch it periodically throughout the year a couple of times. So a 7.5 is how I look at this one, because I do find it a consistently enjoyable movie.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. I think it's one of those ones that's like, it's definitely a very, Hollywood movie. It's definitely got it, pulls all the niches and all that stuff like that for it. Like you said, it's not 100% of an original idea, but it's wrapped in an idea that is original. So it's got like that, like, originality to it, so it's kind of crazy with it. Like I said, I mean, it was definitely some things that you're like, oh my god, this is a cool concept, just because like we were saying with Groundhog's Day and a killer. So it's like, why not make a movie sort of like this? Oh, yeah, cool, yeah. I mean, and there's been other ones that have come after it, and some movies that came in before that movie, but in general, like I said, yeah, I think it's a fun movie. It's definitely got a really huge watchability. It's definitely on that list of like ones that like your average, horror fans are gonna watch. You know what I mean? It's definitely on there on the level of like Scream and stuff like that, where it's like, you're gonna have a wide variety of audiences that are gonna watch this movie. It's gonna cater to all kinds of fans of movies, whether they be comedy fans and or horror fans, because even though it is a horror movie and it does have some horror aspect of it, it's not too over the top gross and disgusting that people who aren't really big huge horror fans can still enjoy it, and people who are horror fans can still be like, "Oh, okay, cool, this was fun, we'll watch it." So yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with the 7.5 on the scale for Happy Death Day.
Right on, man. Absolutely. So there you go, Fangs and Infernos. That's the way it's going to be for Happy Death Day. Now, we're going to go back 10 years from Happy Death Day and 18 years from this current present. And fuck, guys, strap in for this one. This is a incredibly unique movie. Very, very unique. Again, it has similarities to movies that have preceded it. There are similar concepts at play, but from the look of the killer, the idea behind what they're doing, and the way the movie is based and rooted, it's a very, very unique thing. And you really need to be prepared for like an experience with this one. Whether some fangs are going to be super down for the experience and be like rah rah, and other fangs are probably just going to be like, oh, what the fuck, I can't, like, I just don't get it. It's not for me. It's definitely got a teeter totter effect to it. But the thing about this movie is very, very interesting, and why I say it the way I do is like it's really best when you're experiencing this movie for the first time, like I was. You got to make time for this movie. Don't go into this movie tired. Don't go into this movie distracted. Like, give it 2 hours. It's not quite 2 hours long, but, just in the big picture, just give it 2 hours of your time to really try to get dialed in, because you're going to need it, because this one is all over the place. So, Devil, my friend, why don't you take us into TimeCrimes?
Yeah. I mean, this was one that I like. I don't remember where I randomly found out about this movie. It just, because like I said, one, it's a it's a Spanish film, so it's a foreign film. It's a weird, like you said, it's a weird movie. It's got a weird concept. It's kind of like you don't know what's really happening 90% of the time, but it's one of those ones where it's like, yeah, it gets so weird that you kind of like almost don't want to watch it, but then when you keep watching it, you kind of get benefited for, wow, I'm kind of glad I finished this movie, because it's such a crazy movie. But like I said, yeah, I mean it's a basic movie. I mean, like the premise is, this guy, he's coming home. He's got this house and his wife, and he's just kind of just chilling in his yard, and he sees something kind of on the side, and he's like, "What the hell's going on over there?" And then his wife, is like, "Hey, I'm gonna go out to the store," and he's like, "Oh, okay." And then he looks in the binoculars again and sees a naked girl, and he's like, "What the hell is going on, man? It's like naked chick just chilling in the woods or something like that." So he goes and tries to investigate this thing, and he goes and finds this girl, and she's kind of figuring out, and he's freaking out, and all of a sudden, he gets stabbed by this masked guy that's got this like almost kind of invisible man type feel to him. He's wearing a trench coat. He's got like a wrapping around his face, kind of like the Invisible Man kind of feel to it. And you're like, what the hell? What the hell's going on? And he's, this guy's trying to kill him, and he's trying to figure out, and he's running back, and he randomly finds this weird house kind of science lab area kind of thing, and he goes in. The guy is like, oh man, like, hey man, this guy's trying to kill me. This guy, he's like, oh man, here, hide in this. And anybody that tells you to hide into something and all of a sudden it closes down like a vault or a capsule or any of that kind of shit, you probably is not a great idea to begin with. I'm like, who in the hell? No, I'll hide behind something. I'll hide in like your closet or some shit like that. I'm not going in this thing that this weird, almost kind of looks like a weird like science project kind of like machine that's got liquid in it, and you're like, why the hell would I be hiding in this? But unfortunately, he does hide into it, and then he gets up and he tries to figure out what the hell's going on, and that's when the madness goes, man. It's pretty much, once you get into this movie, like, straight away, once it gets to that part of the movie, you're kind of like, okay, this is pretty cool. And then the shit and bananas start going super, super crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like you were telling the Fangs, is like there is a payoff for this movie. It's really just a matter on being dedicated to the ride. And again, this movie is not particularly long. I always just use the 2 hours as a generic window. It's still about a standard hour and a half, hour and 40-minute movie. It's not ridiculously long. And like you said, there is a payoff for it because things get crazy. I love the look of the killer for Invisible Man purposes and how much, we love Universal monsters. So that's kind of cool. The Invisible Man's never going to take, motherfuckers out that way. But it's kind of cool to have like a little bit of a reference to something you are familiar with, especially when you don't know a lot or are as familiar with what's going on. Because again, it's a foreign film, it's a Spanish movie, it's subtitled. So even parts of that are really tricky, but it's got that bizarre setup too, where it keeps you intrigued casually enough as the generic kind of weirdness is happening, because it's kind of like basic weirdness. Okay, home invader, you don't really want to get like busted by him, but it's really strange for him to be like on the phone with his like homie who's like, come up this way, I'll light up the path. Okay, you're cool. You're in the clear. Just keep coming up to the door. I'll be here. I got you. Oh, no, wait. He's seen the path. He's seen the lights. He's coming. Run. And you're just sitting there like, what the fuck? Like, I mean, how is this a thing? But yeah, when you get through, the buildup, you get through the story of it, there is a payoff when like the craziness comes too. You get a good amount of bloodshed. You get a good amount of like twists and just kind of unique in this like throwback feeling, especially to like when he's like watching himself and like seeing himself. So it's got like similar nods to other time loop movies, like for any of our Fangs and Infernos that are fans of like Harry Potter, and you watch, I think it was like the Prisoner of Azkaban movie, but like they circle back around where like, the girl's got the little time necklace thing, and at one point they're hiding, but they can see themselves like down at the bottom of the quarry kind of a thing. But it's just a really interesting design. It's very unique. It doesn't have a real comparable like movie like for it. It definitely is its own kind of thing. But it like you said, and like we discussed, it has a lot to do with just, are you in for the ride? Is the juice worth the squeeze? I think so. I'd like to think so, and I believe that it is. I just think it's it kind of depends on what kind of juice you drink, I guess, is sort of the way to do that. Like, this was a very unique experience for me, and I'll go into my thoughts more deeply when we get into the obituaries shortly. But it's gonna gravitate to some. It's gonna be a turn off to others. but I think in general it'll be enjoyed by many. It's just really about your taste in weird.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's basically where it's gonna come into, and like like we've done with before when we've done movies, like a lot of times we do older movies, we do movies that, that even though this movie had come out in 2007, so it's been a long time. A lot of people probably maybe not familiar with this movie. Like I said, it's not a very big popular movie. It wasn't. It didn't get an American remake, even though apparently it was supposed to get an American remake at one time with Tom Cruise of all people attached to it. I don't know whether or not he was going to be in the movie or if he was just producing the movie, but at one point, they were going to make it because just like we've talked about before with Let Me In and Let the Right One In and all these, the girl with the with the hornet and its nest and stuff like that, and the dragon tattoo and all that kind of stuff. These American, these foreign films, America always likes to remake these movies. So it doesn't surprise me that there was a possibility of this movie being remade. So as I'm getting into into like the what where this movie falls in the time loop was we're talking about, with Happy Death Day. I'm, gonna give out the big spoiler alert. If you haven't seen this movie yet, do not watch or do not listen to what I say until you at least see the movie.
Yeah,
Then come back and watch it because you don't want what I'm gonna say this, which is definitely a spoiler, to
yeah.
spoil what's going on. But
Pause this episode right
yeah,
now.
which in a weird way to try to explain this movie, which is a movie that really kind of has no explanation because it's so crazy off the wall. But this is basically kind of what the movie is. So he's watching this person. That person that he looks into the thing is actually another copy of him. So every time that he goes into this machine, another version of himself comes out. So throughout this movie, you've got 4 or 5 versions of this main character, and everybody's doing that. So when when he's sitting in the chair and he saw the girl getting naked, he was standing next to her, making her get naked. When he goes and tries to investigate and he gets stabbed by himself. Everything in this whole entire movie is like all loops of all the same guy who's just basically just running amok because this dude, the guy who runs that was helping him out that made him go into this thing, is working on a holiday when he shouldn't be there in a experimental time machine thing that he's not even supposed to even be touching right now, and that he's gonna get into some deep shit whenever when everybody finds out. But that's the cool thing about it, is like you find out like everything in this movie. Even in the very beginning of the movie, he gets like, when he's talking to his wife and he just got home, he gets a weird phone call. And the phone call, he's like, what the hell's going on? You find out that was him calling himself on the phone. It's just, yeah, this movie was just like, whenever you figure out what's going on, you're like, what the hell? So, yeah, so it's like, it's still weird. Even though I explained it, it still doesn't even explain what it was about. This movie is just like, just so off the wall crazy, but it was just so cool. I love the concept where it was like, yeah, it's like kind of like it kind of reminds me of the butterfly effect, you know what I mean? Where, you change something and something bad happens every time. So every time like he tries to do something and he goes to it, so he goes back in the time and another person goes in there. But every time he goes into it, another person is going in that machine. So every time that somebody's doing something, somebody's always going into that machine and making another version of himself. So eventually you're just going to keep on having all these people, and he's trying to like stop him from doing it. He's like, oh, I'm going to do this. Well, because he did that was what caused him to do the first thing in the first place. So it's like, it's basically just like, like you said, a butterfly effect. Like he's just trying to like, okay, maybe if I do this, it's gonna stop this guy from doing that. Oh, don't let this dude in the machine. Well, of course he's gonna get in the machine because it's just without getting in the machine, without getting that first person. If you keep on stopping that prime person from going, then how nothing else is gonna happen. So everything has to happen. So it's like, Yeah, it's yeah. When it comes to time loop movies, I mean, it's just they're always weird. I
Yeah.
mean, they're hard to explain. It's just like it doesn't make any sense because it's like even time traveling movies. It's like you have like Terminator, where he comes into the future and stuff like that to go to the past to say I'm your kid and stuff like that. So he had that. So it's like, well, so if I didn't do this, would I have gone in the future? But then you went in the future, so it was regardless of how even you were trying to come here to help and destroy all the bad guys. But if you destroyed all the bad guys, then if you came into the past and destroyed all the bad guys, then the bad guys wouldn't be in the future, and there wouldn't be no sense of you coming back to the past because you wouldn't have been, you know, post-traumatic stress disorder, and you wouldn't have done this, and you wouldn't have gone back into the past. So it's kind of these movies kind of contradict themselves
Yeah, it's
when it comes
definitely
to that stuff.
it does, because like there are movies that don't go so deep and so all over the place that the contradictories really get layered. Um, and I think that Back to the Future is a good example of that. I think they did a good enough job to just go deep enough to where they could kind of tie up that end, in a way that makes sense. But then there's definitely plenty of other movies in that time loop, genre that just go so deep because they really just kind of want to fuck with you on every sensibility that it just turns into a giant, like, it's like when you don't properly put away your Christmas lights. It's just a ball of knotted mess and you can't figure anything out. But it's definitely a cool movie, a very, very unique concept, and a very interesting execution. I mean, it definitely has that independent film. It by no means had the budget that Happy Death Day had. It also has a little bit of that kind of guerrilla feel with the way that it was shot as well, because that's kind of part of the whole, you know, kind of is part of the whole like plot to a certain degree as well. It's like that kind of like, looking through the woods, seeing things, because again, he's watching the naked girl and doesn't realize that he himself is forcing her to do this. So he's looking at it from one perspective. Now another person's, he then is looking at it from the other perspective. So it's definitely an interesting movie. It's fun, it's unique, and but it's an interesting ride, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely I mean, as far as most of the time loop movies, I mean, there's only probably one or two other movies that, no, maybe one that probably matches it in craziness. That was a movie called Predestination. If anybody wants to watch that, it's got Ethan Hawke in it. It's based off of a book that's like literally like 30 pages long, but it's the craziest movie you'll ever see in your entire life. Like, you think that the craziness of TimeCrimes is insane, that movie bops it by a billion times. I mean, it's probably the craziest movie when it comes to this kind of stuff like that, because I mean, no other movie, I mean, is not even close to that movie. That's probably the one. But like I said, I like these kind of movies. Like I said, they're always, like I said, you got to watch them and you got to be really
Yeah.
weird. You got to be into the science kind of fiction aspect of it too. You know what I mean? It's gonna be, you're going into a weird realm when you're going into quantum physics
Yeah.
and quantum realms and quantum, theories, and even with the Marvel movies, with them going into like, the different, universes and multiverses and stuff like that. I mean, that's pretty much kind of what these kind of movies are. It's very multi, versing kind of thing. So yeah, they always get kind of weird, and you're like, okay, which guy is this guy, that guy? Okay, so which guy is the original? Is the original guy the guy that you watched in the beginning? It could be the guy, but then again, it's like if it's the original guy that you saw in the very beginning of the movie, then He's not really, because he called himself. So it's like, which guy is the original guy? Like, what? Who would it? Where did it start from the original one? And you're like, okay, we're going to that, and then maybe, okay, maybe it's this guy. Maybe that guy is the original one. But depending on how far back he wants to go, or how far forward he wants to go. So yeah, it's just, yeah. When it comes to these kind of movies, it's just like, I don't know. You just gotta just strap yourself in and expect the unexpected, and watch it. Like I said, I mean, as far as like I said, and as far as a horror aspect of this movie, I mean, yes, it doesn't really have the horror aspect of it versus, that. I mean, there are some cool scenes, like I said, the guy's trying to, kill him the whole entire time. You got these big ass freaking scissors that are pretty gnarly. Like I said, he's banged his head up and he's got a wrapping around like the mummy and stuff like that. You got a woman that breaks her neck throughout the one movie that's pretty gnarly. So I mean, it definitely has some horror aspect of it to it. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely not as horror as far as like Death Day, where it's a little bit more gory or a little bit more like, serial killer. Well, this was just more like more science fiction with a little bit of horror into it.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me a little bit like what you were saying about is like not exactly knowing who the real person is. Kind of reminded me a little bit in like, in Light Fair of like the Treehouse of Horror on The Simpsons when, Homer was cloning himself in a hammock with a hammock, and you realize that the clones don't have a belly button. And that was like the only way to tell that they were a clone versus being like a real person.
Yeah.
But it's a cool movie, man. It's definitely unique. It's definitely its own thing. But let's kick it off to you, man, to start off the obituaries, man. Where do you see this movie for you?
I mean, for me, like I said, I mean, again, it's gonna be like one of these one weird conversations like we've had before with certain movies. I mean, I mean, I enjoy this movie, but it's got to be it's definitely gonna be a very narrow, definitely a very, small amount of people that probably are gonna like this versus a Happy Death Day. That's the more commercial, the more, it's like Back to the Future, Groundhog's Day, that's the Happy Death Day. This movie is like the Wicked Stepchild or something like that versus, with that. So it's like, to me, I mean, I like Happy Death Day and I like the movie, and I love TimeCrimes. I mean, to me, I thought this was a cool movie. I was like, I remember when the first time I seen it, I was like, dude, I've never seen anything even remotely like that. Even though I've seen some time looping and time stuff, I've never seen anything remotely like it, where it's like everything, like I said, every time you find out something, you're like, holy shit, this kind of predates this stuff. So it's like, okay, now it's that. And it's like having so many of them, he's chasing himself, and his self is chasing another self, and another self is chasing another self, and another self is driving him off the cliff where he falls and wrecks. And that's how he gets the bandage, because he wrecked himself. And it's like Jesus, man. Like it goes to the point like how many you don't even know. Like he keeps on saying like, this is number 2, this is number 3. At one point in the movie, I think you got to 5 maybe or something like that. But who knows how many more there could have been? There could have been 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 of these guys. You only find out about 5 or 6 of them, but to an extent, it's you keep on trying to correct yourself, but every time you keep on trying to correct this and try to fix it, it just keeps on making more chaos and more of that. So like I said, to me, I've always enjoyed this movie. I think it's a fun movie. Like I said, it's not for everybody, mainly because it's, well, I mean, one, it's a foreign film, so you definitely got, you got to either watch it with really bad English dubbings, which is always really horrible, where it's like, hey, I'm gonna go to the bathroom. It's like, who talks like that? or you gotta read subtitles, and some people don't like to read, so, or can't read, so it's definitely, you're gonna deter some people because of that, and then the weirdness of this movie, even though, like I said, Happy Death Day has got that same sort of weirdness. It is a time loop, it is a time kind of movie. It's just not as weird
Yeah.
as TimeCrimes. So like I said, to me personally, like I said, I would give this movie an 8, just because I love this movie. I think it's cool. But I mean, to me, I'll I'll narrow down with the Death Day and 7.5 for me.
I get you, man, for sure. Like my thing is simple with this. Like I am on the other side of the spectrum. Like I look forward to watching this movie again. I do. I look forward to trying to get a better grasp on it. I have a high tolerance and a total enjoyment for weird and like out there. This one was a bit of a struggle for me. It was a tough concept for me. And it might be because like while I do enjoy that kind of psychological, scientific-y type stuff, this one was a tougher one for me to digest. It was just a little bit all over the place. And it also might have to do with the fact that when it comes to something like a Happy Death Day, it was Happy Death Day. Granted, it is a safer concept. But that's something I can very much appreciate when it comes to TimeCrimes, is that appreciation for when people just go balls out and are committed to the story they want to tell and are really just down for the cause. But I definitely also agree with you with what you already said, where it's a narrow window for fans when it comes to this movie. Like with the general horror populace. Like I think it can be and probably will be appreciated by many. But I do feel that the grouping of people who are going to be like, oh man, yeah, TimeCrimes, I really like that movie, or man, I love that movie, is going to pale in comparison to the amount of people who are like, I either didn't like it or I just didn't get it. And that's the thing. I got the movie. I understood it, and that was something I could really appreciate about the movie. But the way it was set up for me, and it is slightly out of my preferred niche and my style when it comes to horror movies, which probably has a touch to play into the way I'm thinking about this movie, which is a reason why I definitely want to revisit it and can see myself watching it, down the line multiple times. But I don't see it falling into a category of movies that I consistently watch, not necessarily on the regular, but in a more consistent amount of time. I think it's definitely got that cult appeal, but man, it's a cult of fans that'll definitely be into this one. So me personally, I'm a little stiff on this one. I give it a 6.5 personally when it comes to this, and it has nothing to do with the movie itself. It's just how I feel about when I'm watching it and how I'm understanding it, where there's still a little bit of fogginess to it, while, again, the payoff was there and it's solid. And I understood what it was telling me, but it was tricky. This one was kind of hard on me, but I like being challenged in that way also. I just got to be honest about it from like my perception when it came to this one. So it's a 6.5 for me, which, between the two of us gives it a 7. How do we feel about that, bro?
Yeah, man. I agree. I agree with your points. Like I said, I knew when I chose this one, especially because of you doing Happy Death Day, which is a more your more common based one. And like I said, I knew throwing this one into the loop. I mean, there were a couple other ones I was thinking about putting into that might have done a little bit better, maybe versus it. But most of the movies, I mean, like I said, other than Happy Death Day, as far as horror films of the time loop ones, I
Yeah.
mean, there's some newer ones now, like where they just came out, like that one that just came out on Netflix, or that called Killer Instinct or something like that. That had like a little. There are a couple more things now like I probably could have done with Happy Death Day, but I was already committed to wanting to do TimeCrimes just
Yeah,
because
man.
I think it was just it's a cool movie, and it's a movie where I'm like, well, I know. I was like, I know you weren't gonna ever probably see this movie unless I picked it for you to watch. So I was like, I want to make him watch my crazy shit that I want to make him watch. So
Which is cool though, Devil. Like, don't get me wrong, dude. Like, I like that. Like, you've done that to me multiple times in our first season plus of the show. Like, I like that. I like discovering things and being, and like, being challenged, for lack of a better term. I'm down for that, bro. I like it. I dig. Yeah, in retrospect, there was the movie that you brought up. There's also a more recent movie called Totally Killer.
Yeah, that's the one I was talking about. That Totally Killer. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that was the one. Yeah. Totally Killer. That definitely has that much more.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, that would have been
probably
better,
safer, kind of a safer concept than TimeCrimes did. But Fangs, Infernos, Ghouls and Fiends, like, check it out. Like, give it a shot. Let yourself be confused. Like, it's, Devil and I have been doing this for a long time. We're very experienced when it comes to horror movies. But the fact of the matter is, we still have our own comfort zones when it comes to stuff, and we like to step out of them. And that's what, Devil did to me on this one. And I appreciate him for it. And I think it's something for you guys to check out, and definitely, make yourself wonder. But one of the things that we had in our notes, Devil, that I got to bring up before we, chisel the scores onto the obituaries is watching it on Tubi, which has little commercial breaks. Nothing that's going to drown down the movie or eat up your evening. But it's got little breaks. The commercials were in Spanish.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of crazy. Like, once in a while there would be normal commercials,
right?
Then all of a sudden it'd just be like, I'm like, just because I'm watching a movie that's from Spain, that's a Spanish speaking movie, doesn't necessarily mean that I'm Spanish. You know what I mean? Like, there's a reason why I have this in subtitles.
They'd be normal commercials. They'd be normal commercials that we'd be used to seeing in English, but they'd be in Spanish.
Yeah. Like, it'd be like a Colgate commercial, but in Spanish. It'd be like, why? I'm like I said, it'd be different if I was watching TimeCrimes on Telemundo, or, like a Spanish hardcore, fully all Spanish channel, but it's Tubi. Yeah. You know what I mean? Even though Tubi does have movies, you can go and find, like, you go, like, so let's just say Happy Death Day is on Tubi. You can usually find, like, a Happy Death Day, and then they have a Happy Death Day in Spanish. Like, right. Tubi does play a lot of like a lot of films, like, and then the Spanish versions of it. So maybe that's a big thing for. But I thought that was just kind of funny too. Like, I was like, why the hell are the commercials in Spanish too? I have no idea what. Like, I know what they're trying to sell me because I can see it. I know it's toilet paper, but I have no idea what they're talking about using the toilet paper for.
It's so funny, bro, because when Mrs. Vamp got me into Tubi, because she was a Tubi person long before I was, because she had a smart TV before I bought one for the house. And, I thought it was a glitch in Tubi, because I would, like, be scrolling through movies and it would have, like, 3 or 4 Terrifiers next to each other, or like Ong Bak the Thai Warrior, or like Mad Max, or whatever. There'd be like 2 or 3 just in a row right next to each other. And I thought it was a glitch. Like, I thought my app was broken or something, until I, like, clicked on one of them and then, backed off of it, and then clicked on the next one to realize that they would put in parentheses, like, Espanol or German or something. And I'd be like, oh my God, they offer certain movies in multiple languages. That's actually kind of cool. But it was interesting because, when I first got into Tubi and I would see that, I didn't realize that was a thing. I just thought my app was broken. So definitely funny on that. But Fangs, Infernos, Ghouls and Fiends, that's the way it's going to be, with a 7.5 for Happy Death Day to a 7.0 for TimeCrimes. That's the way we are going to lock it on the obituaries. It's victory to the vampire today as Happy Death Day takes out TimeCrimes. But as always, Fangs and Infernos, we appreciate you guys, but we absolutely appreciate as well our beloved partners and sponsors of the Vampire and Devil podcast. So we see you guys again very, very shortly. Horns up. Fangs out.
Devil, my friend, I think we should have a little quick conversation about everybody's respectful celestial abodes, where it be my little coffin where I lay my head at night, or at times that you feel that you just want to go back down to make sure that hell's not getting out of whack while you are away. Let's talk about it. Vampire and Devil's newest partnership in Twisted Vines, our dear friends, Chris and Sarah and Cadaver.
Oh yeah, you like scary stuff, you like horror decor, come and check out Twisted Vines. They make all the kind of cool shit, all for your house, all kinds of scary shit. They love it. You like to bring back the horror, you want to scare your neighbors, you want to conjure up a friend to talk to, you want to conjure up somebody bad, you want to do some bad stuff to them, you go to Twisted Vines and get some of their merch.
Absolutely, for sure. Everything is completely handmade by them. So if you need a little friend, maybe a round set abode, maybe you want to conduct a little evil towards a friend that was a friend, maybe no longer a friend. They have voodoo dolls they can do for you to allow for such activities. But you know how much we love our Ouija boards, my friend, and they make all of those by hand. They took care of your beloved vampire with a nice Nosferatu board, but the devil, he happens to be a Munsters fan. And not only do they do boards as traditional rectangles, but they can put a little bit of coffin flair in them.
Oh yeah, look at that coffin shape Munster board. Yeah, you wanna conjure up Mr. Herman? You wanna ask him how Pet Cemetery was? You can do it on this board. Oh yeah.
Absolutely, my friend. So again, thank you so much to Twisted Vines for partnering with the Vampire and Devil podcast, and make sure that you Fangs and Infernos are checking them out on their Facebook page, on their Instagram pages, and making sure that you are checking them out as they move around the country, showing their craft off at all of the various horror cons and oddities expos that they love to do. So absolutely, my friend, of course, man, horns up, fangs out for our friends at Twisted Vines.
Oh yeah.
Hey, it's the devil here, talking about those devil movies, or those movies with the devil inside of it. This time we're going to talk about the classic legend, ooh, with the darkness, the devil, Tim Curry. Have you seen this movie? Oh, it's so good. Why not kill a unicorn and use it for special powers? Yes, my demons, my goblins and my ghouls. Check out Legend before Legend checks you out.
Devil, my friend, I think it's time that we spill the tea. Brutalities. Vampire and Devil podcast couldn't be more excited, more humbled to let you all know that we have partnered with very dear friends of ours for a long time in Brutalities. And there's so much great stuff, so many flavors, so much to enjoy, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about it. Isn't that right there, my friend?
Oh yeah, we like it hot. Of course the Inferno likes it hot. Do you like the hot tea? Well, you might as well get some brutality. Yeah, horror movies, puns, rock and roll. Brutality's got it all.
Absolutely. When it comes to the vampire, you know that he's going to absolutely gravitate towards that Nosferatu or that Nosferatu brew. Absolutely a favorite of mine. And we got to show a little bit love to, by all means, the biggest franchise in horror right now. That would be Terrifier. So Brutalities has brought you Terrifier. But that's just from the vampire. The devil has some favorites of his own.
Oh yeah, do you like the movie Pumpkinhead? Well, how about a little pumpkin bread for your throat holes? And like I said, with the rock and roll fans and the horror fans, Wednesday 13 fans, do you like Wednesday 13 and tea? How about a couple of those? With the Summertime Suicide and a couple other ones too. So if you like Wednesday 13 and you like the tea and you like the brutalities, go to the website.
Absolutely. And so, of course, we like to look out for those that look out for us. We love you, Fangs. We love you, Infernos. But as a courtesy from Brutalities to be bestowed on you, we have that Vampire and Devil coupon code, don't we, my friend?
Oh yeah, you want to save a little dough, little cheddar, maybe buy some more shit? Go on the line, Brutalities, type in Vampire and Devil, and you get 10% off your order. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. So it's getting into the chilly weather. People need to warm their bones. They need to warm what little skin they may or may not have. But Brutalities is the way to get it done. So that's the way it's going to be, because Vampire and Devil said so. Horns up, fangs out for Brutalities.
Oh, Devil, my friend. Dude, baby, it's cold outside, man. It's that time of the year. Snow's falling or the temperature's dropping. And the temperature's dropping and it's snowing in certain places. But what do you say, my friend? It's been a very nice, exciting beginning to season 2 so far. So what do you say that we make the snow red?
Yeah, man, it's time to put some hardcore snowballs together and maybe have a little bit of snow fight. Maybe, piss off some gods and do some bad stuff during the winter time. You never know what they're gonna do. There's always something to do during the snow and the cold that can heat up a conversation.
Absolutely, my friend. Of course. And you know what? I think it's very apropos. It's definitely a stylistic understanding for our show. I think the Fangs and Infernos would definitely understand and appreciate that it's probably no better way to kick off our first winter slash snow, episode showdown than pitting two probably of the top undead beings against each other as we do a little bit of a vampires versus zombies. So why don't we talk a little bit about 30 Days of Night and Dead Snow?
Yeah, you know what I mean. It's always good to pair your vampires to your dead Nazi zombies.
Right. Seriously, we got like new school unique looked vampires and we've got zombie Nazis, dude. I mean, that's definitely a really interesting way for us to do it. But why don't we jump into 30 Days of Night, my friend? This one actually stars Josh Hartnett, who at the time, was definitely, he was up there as far as like, celebrity, kind of one of the new young kind of hot things in movies. But I will say first and foremost, when it comes to this movie, like I always liked this movie right off the jump from when I saw it in the theaters originally. I liked the new school take on the vampires. I liked the vision. You and I were talking recently about vampire movies and talking about like appreciating and understanding somebody's vision and how they want to portray something. But I really kind of dug this new look in vampires where it was like less like the classic two canine fangs, almost more like a shark's mouth. Also kind of gave me some of that Lon Chaney London After Midnight feel to it for any of the Fangs and Infernos that are familiar with that movie from back in the day, just with the rows of just all pointed, sharp teeth. So first and foremost, I did think it was a very cool, vision on vampires, and I loved the concept. Where is one of the best place consistently for vampires to thrive? Well, how about a place that is not going to have any sunlight for a real extended amount of time?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, yeah, especially coming into this movie, I was a huge fan of the graphic novels, that the movie is based off of. So I always liked that, like those graphic novels were always really, really cool because it was a different kind of, like you said, it's a different spin on vampires. They were more animalistic, it was
Yeah.
more about, it wasn't about like, being like most vampire movies are usually considered, horror romantic movies. It's about like him enticing somebody or something. Where this is just raw animal energy, where they're just basically like, hey, we feed on blood. We need lots of blood. Where can we go? Yeah, let's go to a part of Alaska that doesn't have, daylight for 30 days or something like that. 30 days of night. Well, hell yeah, man. That's a vampire's wet dream where
Yeah.
they can roam 24/7 and not have to worry about any daylight. So I mean, that's just one factor that they don't have to worry about, because like in any normal vampire movie, other than your garlic and your steaks and all that kind of stuff you're fighting around with, the one thing that you have that's the best defense is to kind of survive for a few hours and get that sunlight, and then once that sunlight comes out, you can kind of do what you need to do, or make traps and do all this stuff like that, because you have this hours of daylight. Where yeah, this movie, it's like, yeah, no daylight, so yeah, you're fucked right to begin with. And I liked it, you know what I mean. I liked the whole concept with it. I liked it was this more like you said, that more animalistic, just
Yeah.
straight for the juggler. There's no
there's no pulling any punches. And like I said, I just like the whole aspect of it where it's like, yeah, everybody's trying to get out of this town, and you know what I mean, because they know, like, and only the hardcore survivor, the hardcore, people who live in this town, even most of the residents of this town usually do leave when this time of year. They fly out and go somewhere else because it's hard to live in a place where, yeah, you're in darkness the whole entire time, which means it's gonna be cold as shit.
Yeah.
There's no way to go anywhere. In this part of Alaska, you're gonna get all that snow, so you're not even be able to go anywhere. So you're kind of trapped in your house for 30 days. So mainly, like, people who normally just like aren't from that area or just live in that area particularly, they're like, yeah, screw this, I'm getting out of here, which makes it good because you've got a town full of 30, 40 people or whatever like that. Well, yeah, you're a vampire, and that was crazy. So I mean, I like that aspect. Like you said, I like the gnarly teeth. It was just like constant like that. I liked the language that they had throughout that. That was kind of cool. Like the whole language they had for the vampires.
Yeah.
And it was like one of the movies where, I mean, in all honesty, I mean, probably other than maybe like Underworld or something like that, it's probably the most vampires you've seen on the screen. There's like at least a couple hundred vampires in this movie, which is insane.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But that was the one thing also that I found kind of like interesting as well, where it's just kind of an interesting concept because, like, exactly, the vampires are going to be so stoked and so excited about a place that they have nothing, one less thing to worry about as far as can taking them out. But it is also that interesting thing where Alaskan towns traditionally aren't heavily populated because, just like you said, there is a lot to deal with living up there. Also, they touch base on that movie in that movie that people do leave when it gets to that time of the year, and not just because they may or may not know that there's vampires around to hunt and feed, but again, it's like what you said, it's going to be cold as fuck. It's like the elements are brutal for a month. So that's really crazy. So the harvest for the vampires is even less. But I did love what you also just touched on too, because the vampire language, I loved that concept for this movie, and in the graphic novels and stuff. I just thought it was very cool because it kind of it gave me that like carny feel, where they would always talk about how, like, the carnies and the traveling carnivals and stuff, like they know how to talk to each other. They have a specific like language that they would always like use to communicate with each other, very, very similar to, like, Brad Pitt's character in Snatch.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it definitely had that kind of feel. It had that kind of feel of like almost gypsy like too, you know what I mean? That
Yes.
whole like gypsy kind of feel to it. And I like it. You had Danny Houston, who was the main vampire in this movie, and like, yeah, you can tell he was like the leader, and I just love the way that he was, just the clicks that he would do, or just like even when he was talking to him sometimes, just the language, you can just like, he was basically like, oh yeah, yeah, you can go ahead and feed on that person, go ahead, or like, hey, stop, you need to we need to think about what we're doing right now. We're working with people who are maybe a little bit smarter than your average bear. They're not completely stupid, so we need to go at this at a certain point. Because like in the movie, which I found really, really interesting, was, yeah, they like basically stuck somebody out. They're all hiding, pretty much mostly almost dead, and then all of a sudden this person's going, hey, help me, I need help, I need help. And everyone's like, hey man, we need to go out and save this person. It's like, obviously this is a trap. And he's like, look at the the rooftops, and you can see they're all like, all the vampires are hanging on the rooftop waiting to, because you obviously, usually if you hear somebody crying for help, human nature is to go out and help them, and they knew that was a way that they could manipulate people to go and try to help, because that pulls on it, especially when they bring out the little girl, the little kid in the movie. It's like, yeah, who doesn't want to go out and help a little kid? But then again, it's like, yeah, that head vampire, you can tell he's been around the block for a little while. He's like, yeah, 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 I know how to do this. And it's just like, just those scenes and stuff like that in this movie. And then, like, but probably my favorite part of the scene in the entire movie was like, when everybody's doing, he's got the person, and she was taught, praying, and he's like, God, he's like, God, and it looks like, oh God.
Yeah.
Kind of, it's just a cool effect. I just like the way that their brutalness, like, even
even the character in the movie that's sort of the familiar, I guess, what you have with the vampires, where you have that human and he goes into town and he does some of the bad stuff and goes like that, and he's like, oh yeah, they're gonna turn me into, into one of the vampires and do all this stuff like that, and then they even were like, yeah, no, dude, we were never gonna turn you, man. You're human. You're pieces of shit, which kind of makes you feel like these vampires are all like, not different than your classic vampire, where you bite somebody and turn them into a vampire and you kind of bring them into the family. Where these were vampires that were all sort of maybe even born vampires.
Yeah, just kind of like birthed, you know, and stuff. So, there's that potential underlining topic of, do vampires really have sex, kind of a thing.
Yeah,
But it's interesting with that for sure. And I also kind of liked that idea though too, where it was like, because the funny thing is, the familiars all pretty much have that same that same kind of naiveness of like, you know support your master, obey, do what you're told in hopes of becoming one of them. How often, honestly, though, do they really get their way? There's really not a lot of documentation of like the familiars like really becoming a part of it. Yeah, there's definitely some. Don't get me wrong. The number's not zero, but it's definitely much more of like they need to understand that they're allies. They're being used for the sake of like the vampire situation. Bring me people to feed on, or make sure that the shades are always closed. All that kind of stuff. But I always thought that was like really really cool. One of my only things I always was a little curious when it came to this movie, even when I watched it, and then it kind of came to light as well when it got towards the end and stuff like that, was the idea of like, how quickly can like when like a strong vampire is taken out by another vampire who's not as strong. It kind of reminds me of that topic that we discussed before of like, you gotta take your time. It takes time to learn all the cool shit. And I always felt that this movie had a little bit of that to it, where they missed the opportunity to capitalize, but also keep in mind that it's not as believable when, somebody new really can stand up to somebody seasoned.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's that. I mean, that would probably be my, like I said, if this movie has a downfall, that's pretty much the whole movie's downfall of this movie was, like Josh Hartnett's character is figuring out, man, there's just no way. There's way too many of these vampires. There's no way we're gonna get out. We're trapped. The only thing I can do is maybe fight fire with fire. So he decides to, inject himself with a little bit of blood, turn himself into vampire, because he realized that the one guy, when they turned him to begin with, that even though he was a vampire and had that, he still had a little bit of his normal sense, because he was still himself a little bit, where he can still control what he needed to do. So he was like, hell yeah, man, okay, I'm gonna turn into this. And yeah, like I said, yeah, like you said, I mean, all of a sudden, you got this Josh Hartnett vampire guy who is a badass, but yeah, because he's got those kind of powers that a vampire does. But then, like you said, like Danny Houston's character, you can just tell there's a reason why he's a leader in this. Especially with some of these vampires that they have. Like, you see Danny Houston, and Danny Houston's character, even though he's big, he's tall and kind of stocky, he's not the biggest alpha omega of the vampires. There's a few other guys that are in his clique that are like huge monster fucking muscular dudes, and those guys are just little pawns versus Danny. Danny's a more intelligent vampire, and that just goes to tell you, like, it isn't all about muscle and power and all that. It's about common sense and knowing how to do things. And that was definitely the one part of the movie where it was like, yeah, I mean, come on, I mean, he just turned into a vampire. Yeah, he might be able to beat a few of those little crony guys or stuff like that, but in general, yeah, I don't think he's gonna outdo the OG.
No, and that was my thing too. Is I was kind of like, it doesn't work that way. It reminds me of another vampire movie that I've mentioned before on this show, and I've talked about it at length, just outside of the show with in Vampire Talk, is a movie like The Invitation, which I absolutely loved. It was a great modern spin though on that classic posh pinky out English, prim and proper vampire, and I loved it. I thought the overall design of that movie was executed great. I'm a fan of that movie for 95% of the movie, and then when it gets to the end, just the like insanely simplistic way that they took out the main guy was like shockingly stupid to me. And I was like, why? How? No. And it kind of reminded me of like when we had that conversation about Idle Hands, where Seth Green is kind of joking about like, oh, well, wait, we stabbed the hand and all it did was kind of like shake and vibrate and puff into smoke and go away. No giant epic, death.
Yeah.
That's weak. It had similarities to that, because while I liked the end, and it's not that, and it's not like the fight wasn't without its charm. It was solid. It really was. It gives me that Abigail feel. You gotta learn. You gotta earn your stripes before you gotta learn all the cool shit. You're not just blessed with all the cool gadgets and gizmos. Almost kind of like in Grandma's Boy, when the one character's grandmother is fighting like the prodigy guy, and the prodigy guy thinks he knows everything, but the grandma's been playing the game for months, so she knows like all the ins and outs of the game. It's that kind of a thing where it's like, you know what, I don't hate it, but I just wish more movies would keep in mind that if you're turning from something into another thing, that if there's benefits to being that new thing, you're probably not going to figure it out right away. And I just kind of wish more movies would get that.
Yeah, I mean, we all understand why, obviously the good guys got to win and Josh Hartnett's character's got to win. So, like, that's the reasoning. But yeah, it's just like one of those ones like you're talking about. Like, I didn't hate this ending nearly as much, but it reminded me of, like, John Carpenter's Vampires. Like, where I love that movie, and then all of a sudden you have this, these guys who just turned into vampires all of a sudden killing, like, the OG guys way too easily. And it's just like, come on, man, that doesn't make no sense whatsoever. Like, you might be able to kill a couple little cronies, but you're not going to kill. I mean, there's a reason why probably Danny Houston's character has probably been centuries that he's been living. Then all of a sudden he just goes against one guy. And like I said, sometimes, just like in real life, sometimes, you may be a badass, but you find that one person, he just happened to be in that one town that just happened to go against that one person that was going to get the better of him. But like I said, I mean, it would have been more. I think to me, it would have been more interesting if Josh Hartnett's character would have probably beat him without being a vampire. Versus, like, I get the whole purpose of that, which in one aspect I get it, and then I don't get it. But then again, it makes for a cool ending because Josh Hartnett's character doesn't like want to be, doesn't want to turn into one of these things. So he's like, you know what? I'm just gonna sit here with my girl and we're gonna watch the sunlight, and watch the, the sunset on, after that 30 days of night and stuff like that. And it's a cool scene, and he burns and you can feel the pain. But yeah, like I said, I get the storyline driving it, but it always drives me crazy. It's like, again, like I said, 99.9% of movies are always gonna have the bad guys lose and the good guys win because, that's nobody wants the good guys to go down except for us bad guys.
Exactly, 100%. And but so it is what it is. It is kind of that, well, this is the formula of movies at this time. So you don't have to like it, and a lot of times we don't. But it just kind of is what it is. It's just like what you said, Devil. It just Josh is going to come out on top in some facet. In this case, though, unfortunately, he comes out a winner, but still ultimately becomes a loser, which is a bummer, you know. But I liked the ending of the movie for that reason, because there is a little bit of that. Well, you might have gotten, you might have gotten the better, of our colleague. You might have gotten the better of our villain guy, but you don't get to just live out the rest of your days in happiness with this like badge of honor. No, you're just going up in ash.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, like I said, I mean, as far as like when it comes to endings, like I like that. I mean, I like the fact that it's like, he probably could have lived and stayed, but he's just like, you know what, I'm not gonna deal with this and deal with the vampireness of this. I'm just gonna cash in the chips and watch that sun.
Absolutely, man, 100%. So, what do you think, my friend, as we pop into the obituaries and decide a little bit about how we like this movie? Like I said, honestly, like I said to start off the review, I like the movie. I always have. I always will. I really don't foresee a situation where I don't enjoy this movie consistently. Again, I like people's interpretations of things. I thought it was very cool. It was definitely unique. I'd never seen anything like it in that particular way. I love the fact that while it was coming off of a graphic novel, it had a little bit of that, well, how would I describe it? Kind of similar to like, 28 Days Later kind of zombie feel, where yes, you've changed, you've morphed, you've done these things, but certain motor skills are actually still pretty strong, which I thought was actually pretty cool. But again, I loved the kind of shark animalistic, just look, you're not going to get two pricks and I'm going to drink your blood. I'm just going to legitimately leave a crater in your anatomy, and I'm just going to feast on everything. So overall, I thought it was a really good movie. It's a fun time. I like the concept. I think it's a good adaptation off of a graphic novel, and there's plenty of history of bad interpretations of graphic novels. This is one that ultimately I think got it right. I enjoyed on a consistent basis. It does have a sequel. I've seen it. It's all right. Didn't need to be a thing, but it does exist. So for the sake of another vampire movie, cool, right on. It's on my shelf. But meh, I kind of wouldn't have hated for 30 Days of Night to just kind of rock out as the interpretation of it. But overall, again, I like it. It's got that traditional kind of like pretty boy formula that especially, early 2000s with the new series of heartthrob actors has, but overall, I think it's enjoyable time. I watch it a couple of times a year and do consistently like it. So it's a good 7.5 for me.
Oh yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with you, especially at the time when these movies were coming out. These vampire movies, these like fast-paced zombies, like you were saying, like 28 Days Later and all that kind of stuff. This like more animalistic kind of like horror genre, where it's fast-paced, where you more than likely, if you have 100 characters, that 99 out of 100 characters are more than likely going to die, versus like, these slower ones where you have 100 characters, you may get 25 that survive and 75 that die. This is almost guaranteed death, you know what I mean? Because it's hard to get away from, these kind of vampires that are not playing games. They're not trying to woo you or do anything like that. They're just trying to eat. So they don't even care, man. They're running in, they're killing little kids. They don't give a shit who it is. You got blood, they want it. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, it's always a movie where I enjoy watching it. I always find little cool things about it every time I watch it, and it's definitely got, it's got its likability, it's got its watchability again. And like I said, I like the fact that, it was riding on that tail of Josh Hartnett, becoming this, bigger actor. He was getting a lot of these cool, bigger roles. It's definitely, when we talk about this movie versus like, when we talk a little bit later about DeadSnow, it's basically like Hollywood versus like independent, or DeadSnow being more European independent, but it definitely has that Hollywood feel to this movie. You can definitely tell it had that this movie definitely had the budget and used the budget very well. I mean, it's good actors, good script. It had good good graphics in it, good special effects. Nothing wasn't over the top cheesy, but it had its fun. So overall, like I said, I enjoy it. And it's just a fun movie. So I definitely got to agree with you with a 7.5
Cool.
for
Yeah.
30 Days a Night. Although, like you were saying, with the sequel, yeah, maybe not as much. I think they should have ended it
Yeah.
without doing a sequel. We were talking about it for a while, oh, they should make a sequel to this. And then it's like, maybe they shouldn't have made a sequel to this now.
I know. And it's one of those things where, the rate on the obituary for 30 Days of Night stays strong because we're not talking about franchises as opposed to my beloved Witchboard, which, man, that franchise took a hit because of that third movie. But yeah, dude, and it's cool. And again, as like a final closing thing, because I didn't really mention it in the review, but you had kind of touched on it, is like with the vampires up on the roofs and stuff. I loved that kind of like just stalk out, make people feel uneasy, design of it, where the vampires were almost kind of like a murder of crows or like a collection of vultures. They're just waiting. And like, as the old saying goes, like just circling the carcass. And, I always just thought that was pretty cool because that alone is an incredibly like eerie feeling where you're like looking out the windows or peering around things and you just see, the whatever the creatures may be, vampires, birds, whatever, zombies, in trees or just lined up, like a whole horde of like things, which is actually very similar to a point we'll make in 2 minutes. But I always thought that was kind of a cool concept, that idea of that uneasy feeling where you are looking around and you're just like, shit, man, we're fucked. So another cool concept on that. But
Yeah.
Yes, definitely solid. Fangs and Inferno. So that's the way it's going to be. We're going to do a 7.5 for 30 Days of Night. And now we are going to stay in the snow. We are going to continue painting it red, but we are going to go to the other top dog when it comes to undead, vigilante viciousness in Zombieland. Not the movie, just the concept of zombies. So, DeadSnow, my friend, this was your pick. It's a European German style, take on, Nazi zombies.
Yeah. When it comes to blood in the snow, this is one of the movies that always comes to hand. You know what I mean? This movie is exactly what you think you're gonna get.
Mm-hmm.
There's no beating around the bush. It's Dead Snow. It's about dead Nazi zombies coming to kill people in the snow, and like I'll jump around a little bit. I just want to jump up ahead. Is that unlike 30 Days of Night, where the second movie was horrible, the second sequel of Dead Snow is actually the better sequel to me, but it's kind of a oxymoron because it's called Dead Snow 2, Red versus Dead, but it's really no snow in the movie. It's mainly like during the summertime, springtime. So the only reason why I didn't pick Dead Snow 2 versus Dead Snow 1, because to me, I mean, I love Dead Snow 1, but Dead Snow 2 is such a better movie. You can definitely tell higher budget, better effects, and stuff like that. But that's why I went with the OG one, just because, it's got to fall in the parameters of some snow horror. And as much as even though it's called Dead Snow, the snow was dead in part 2. But anyway, we're gonna talk about part 1. I mean, what's not to love with this movie? I mean, if you love, college kids going out and doing stupid shit, and trying to go out into this cabin in the woods, kind of, I mean, it's definitely got this movie basically just hits. It's an original movie, and there's no doubt about it, this movie is an original. Is it the first movie to ever have horror zombies in this movie? No. Is it the first movie to ever have, Nazis in a zombie movie? No. Is it the first movie to be caught in the woods in a cabin. No, I mean it definitely takes every horror movie clip from boom, 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 but uses it in such an original way. There's like no real movie that's like it, even though this movie steals from every horror movie from like the 70s and the 80s, kind of mixed all together. It's such a great camp movie where it's just like you're not exactly what you're gonna what you're gonna get. You got the tropes, you got the kids, you got the people doing this, you got the the lovers, and you have the people who aren't there, and then you're gonna do everything else. I mean, the movie sets up almost exactly like you said, like Evil Dead. I mean, it's almost kind of an Evil Dead, which they even talk about Evil Dead in the movie
I
because
know.
one guy's the movie's is a cinephile, and he's talking about all this stuff like that. So it's just kind of funny that this movie is just basically all the way out there. I mean, it's just a crazy movie.
It's funny too because you've got that opening scene where the one person, the one girl is like, okay, no talking about horror movies for an hour, like while we get to where we need to go. And he's like begrudgingly like, fine. Because you can see he's the horror nerd. He's the movie junkie of the crew. But then the one girl is like, she's into that kind of stuff. She's like, oh, well, I like Evil Dead, and I thought that movie was cool, and this, and he's like, and all of a sudden you can just see, swing. He's like, oh, well, really? Let's talk. But it is also funny like that because it does, just like you said, it takes from multiple movies. Like for me, the three little pointed pyramid, just right off the bat that I think about is, Evil Dead for my cabin in the woods, Night of the Living Dead or any of the Deads, for my massive zombies. And then for me, that little bit of actually Puppet Master for like my Nazis and stuff like that. But like there's way more. There's a whole tree with branches when it comes to this movie. But overall, it's a very basic concept. It's a cool, enjoyable, fun movie. That's the funny thing too about the sequel having a bigger budget, because budget-wise, DeadSnow really can't compete with 30 Days of Night. But there's a lot of charm and a lot of fun in movies that play to their strengths that have a lower budget. You and I are super big fans of low budget movies. We talk all the time about low budget films. But it's kind of interesting when it came to this movie, and like I said, like playing with its strengths. The zombies are majority, practical effects zombies. That stuff that Tom Savini or any proper trained, makeup person can execute, which I thought was really good. They get a little out of pocket when it comes to like some of the special effects, like some of the digital effects, because they work and they fit in the parameter of what they're doing. But the editing, the presentation isn't quite what I'd like it to be. But again, a budget speaks, and it's not a detractor, and it doesn't hurt the movie as a whole. But it's a little noticeable. You're a scene that you might want to react a little bit more as ooh or wow, like you're still going to get that reaction in my opinion, but it's hard not to like smirk your little chuckle, kind of like I'm doing now, because I'm thinking about those scenes that make you go like when you see like a little explosion where you can kind of see the digital flame is like in front of the victim. It's hard not to get a little bit of that, cheeky horror camp and enjoyment out of it, though.
Yeah, I mean that's the cool thing I like about this movie. Yeah, if you're into that cheesy camp DIY, low budget horror films, this is a movie for you. But that's the cool thing about this director too. Is like, he's done so many other big movies too, which is another one that we could talk a little bit about. That's sort of almost not exactly the same premise, whole storyline and stuff like that. But movie that with the budget, he did Violent Night, which
Yep.
is the Santa Claus movie with a lot of explosions. Not very similar to this, but it has that same style feel, and that just basically just shows you what this guy can do with a budget where he has a little bit of a Hollywood budget where he can get that kind of money. And that's the thing about this movie. It's like you can definitely tell that this guy, when he's directing this movie, it's just like it's got that that's why I reply it to, or even call back a lot of the Evil Dead. It feels like a student film a lot, just like Evil Dead. You can definitely tell it's like, this guy's first attempt at that. It's very low budget. It's very like on point, on hand stuff. But it's one of those movies where, yeah, I feel like it has that everlasting effect, like, Evil Dead, like Sam Raimi. Who would ever thought that, Sam Raimi, the guy who made Evil Dead, and you watch the Evil Dead movies and the cheesiness of the stuff like that, and even Evil Dead 2, with the talking animals and a guy cutting his arm off and just stupid shit, would go on to make fucking Spider-Man movies.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
It's millions
like,
of budget.
you know what I mean? So it's like, again, with this guy, what I mean? This guy's a European director. Who would have ever thought that, like that? Just like Evil Dead, Dead Snows, people who are fans of the genre of zombies and weird things like Nazis are huge fans of Dead Snow. Everybody's pretty much watched Dead Snow 1 or Dead Snow 2.
Yeah.
So it's like one of those ones where it's on that level to almost like, it's more of a newer generation's version of Evil Dead. And that's why I like this movie, because it is more, you have that kind of feel to it where it's like it has that cult status of like how Evil Dead was to us in the 80s. This is more like the Evil Dead of the 2000s and stuff like that, where it's definitely got that whole feel to it. And like I said, I mean, who doesn't like, killer zombies coming after you wearing Nazi out uniforms and just over the top stupid kills in this movie. I mean, it's just crazy. Just the whole concept, they're in this outhouse, they're in this shed and they're going camping and all like that. And of course they have to go to the bathroom in an outhouse. And of course there's going to be some creepy stuff. A girl goes inside the outhouse, which has got to be like the worst thing in the world, because you got to realize, man, let's say you're being killed, you're being stuck in your house by a killer, right? And let's say, like, for a second you trap yourself in the bathroom, right? You fall in the toilet or something like that. Yeah, is it nasty? Okay, even if somebody just took a piss or shit in there just like 2 seconds ago, okay, that's nasty. This is an outhouse in the middle of nowhere that's probably hasn't been used for a while. The shit that's probably been in there, it's probably been in there for hundreds of years. So if you're falling down and you're getting all this nasty shit that's been in, I'm like, that to me is probably one of the most grossest scenes in the entire movie. It's just literally coming out, covered in like, 100 old. I'm like, by that point, I would have just walked out to the Nazis and just been like, hey man, just kill me now, man.
Yeah, it'd be like just take me now, dude. There's literally nothing you could do to me that's worse than being in this right now. I'm surprised they didn't melt.
Yeah.
But it's definitely funny with that. And again, we talk about the low budget and stuff. I mean, bro, you can just tell that from the phone.
Yeah.
Like, dude. Like fucking brick phones, dude. And the movie came out at a time where the brick phones had gone away by that time.
Yeah, it's just a whole bunch of stuff. You got the guy that's in the snowboard doing all these crazy tricks throughout the whole entire time, and it's just like you have the girl with the dreadlocks and stuff like that, and you're like, okay, yeah, she's gonna be badass, and then she gets whacked, and you're just like, what the hell? And then it's like, you have the one scene where they're getting ready, and the guy's like, oh my god, you bit on me. Chops off. He's like, cut off my hand, cut off my hand, cut off my hand. And goes through all this length to basically, try to keep himself to survive. And then all of a sudden the zombie bites him in the dick. And it's like, it's just like, oh my God. By that point, it's like, dude, you just spent all that time chopping off your hand. Now you're like, yeah, just kill me now.
Yeah, seriously. Like, what a way to go out. I mean, you're not even getting the effects of a zombie cock, dude. You're just fucking dying. Like, and you've already missing like the arm because you just spent your whole with the showboat snowboarder thing. I was kind of glad when that guy got it, because I was like, dude, just stop. You're just trying to impress all these girls and trying to get a piece, and it's like, you know what? The zombies are just gonna take a piece of you, dude. So I was kind of down for that. I enjoyed that one, and I was like, But the other thing too is, I mean, we also didn't talk yet about one of the more amusing kills too, which is the axe to the neck for like off this like whole like, no, I'm good, delayed, fight, I'm survived, whack.
Yeah. Yeah. The axe scene is it's over the top. Like it's just like I said, it's everything in this movie. Like it's just like the can't, like I said, it's basically almost, I mean, I keep saying it over and over and over again, but it's basically like a remake of Evil Dead, but instead of like, these zombies coming, the Deadites coming, it's basically just Nazis, zombies coming after them, and they're in the snow. I mean,
Yeah,
it's just so much over the top stupidness, and you're just like, why is this funny? But it's such a great, just a great movie. It's just, like I said, it's just to the point where when you get these movies, like sometimes when these movies, you take it in some seriousness, like, oh man, this would never really happen in real life, and this would never really happen. And I get like that sometimes, like, okay, even though some of these movies are based off of unreality stuff, you kind of still put a little bit of reality into it. But I'm always like, but that's when, you just take that and throw it behind you. You're like, any sense of realism, you're just like, yeah, no. And that's what I love about this movie. It's just so stupid. And like the zombies coming after them, coming out of the snow, you got them all like proper and they're like that. And inside the cave and all the crazy stuff. I mean, this movie is just so absurd and so stupid, but it just works. It's one of those ones where, like, like Sharknado, we've talked about 9 million times. It's a movie that shouldn't work. It's a sci-fi movie about fucking sharks flying around killing people, and you're like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my entire life, but somehow it works. And that's how Dead Snow is. It's just basically one of those movies where, like, yeah, it shouldn't work, but it does.
right, and right on down to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre / like House of a Thousand Corpses ending, where
Yeah.
you think you've got a survivor, you think it's like, oh my god, it's over and everything's cool, and it's like, no, dude, you never stood a chance. There is millions of us or whatever of us, like, you got away, but I mean, it's just you never had a chance. It's like, yeah, it's like that team that fought in the football game as hard as they could, as the underdog, and had the lead, and then all of a sudden the star team basically was just like, yeah, no, and scores like 3 touchdowns in 6 minutes to just like destroy them. And it's like, yeah, you were never in the game. But also, one of my favorite kills too in that movie, which was so bizarre, was just the chasing down scene where the fucking guy like accidentally impales himself on a tree branch to drag his intestines like 10 feet till he realizes he's stuck on this branch, and then it's just like, oh shit, I did. It's like, but you're right, dude. It's just that absolute absurdity to like but again, that great horror camp, a lot of fun, super enjoyable. Could watch it more than once. And the funny thing is like, while budget wise, the sequel probably would have been better for this showdown as far as budgets and movies versus each other. This is the movie that was proper to use for the concept of our showdown. But that being said, what are you thinking for the obituaries, man? How do you see this one?
I mean, for me, like I said, I mean, this one I give I give it a high account, just because, like I said, it's got everything you want in a movie that's campy and horror and all that. And like I said, just like a lot of us old school heads, we've referred to it 9 billion times in this episode, but we're talking with the Evil Dead. We go back and we talk about that when it talks about horror comedies of anywhere between that early 80s to late 90s. I mean, it's Evil Dead, Army of Darkness, those Sam Raimi films, and that's what this kind of has, that feel to it. Definitely a very, European style version of it, but still has that same kind of feel, that low budget, that that DIY kind of feel to it, and the absurdity of this, and just the stupidness of like the characters, and the stupidness of like what they're doing and how they put themselves in dumb predicaments, and you're like, why would you do that? Like, why would you mean, you got all this crazy stuff. It's like, why would you go right now into an outhouse when there's bad things happening right now? And it's like, this, then why would you do this? Why would you do that? The kind of thing. And then, and then with the crazy zombies and doing that, all the shit that they did in this movie. So it's like, yeah. So to me, I mean, like I said, I mean, overall, like I said, 30 Days of Night is definitely overall a better movie as far as like cleanness, you know what I mean, the budget wise and stuff like that. I think a lot of people are probably gonna enjoy 30 Days of Night a little bit more than Dead Snow. But I kind of feel like, I don't know, it really depends on how you want to go with it. I mean, it's, if you're gonna go most horror fans, you have a person that's just getting into the horror genre, or it's kind of new to the horror genre, or maybe a little bit younger in the horror genre. They're probably going to enjoy 30 Days of Night a little bit more, just because it is more mainstream. It's in English. You
Right.
have Josh Hartnett's character, who's like, a heartthrob. He's a good looking actor and stuff like that. Where, Dead Snow's got a bunch of weird looking foreign people throughout this movie. She's like, even in the scene, she's like, oh, my boyfriend's the best boyfriend in the world, and he's so hot. And it's like, you see the boyfriend, she's kind of like, he's like 40 pounds overweight. Like, it's like, what? Like, wait, how did he pull out and like I said, the girl who does it, she's got the dreads, so she's got that cool look, but she's not a winner herself either. But you're like, she's still way better looking than that guy is. Everybody in this movie is like, really, the only guy that made any sense to, he should probably literally have gotten all the girls, was the guy we hated the most, that was the snowboarder guy. He was the only guy that was decent looking in this whole entire movie. Like, he should have probably had all the girls, in all honesty. So it's like, like I said, I mean, I think people are in general going to go. But, like, if people who are more into, your horror fans that are more into, like, this type of films, what I mean, like that kind of style, I feel like this movie is definitely gonna probably be, they would probably put this movie over on top of that. But I mean, I think this is, Dead Snow is definitely more of like a click kind of versions of where it's like huge horror fans maybe might not like it as much, but like old school, or even
Yeah,
like the people who like like these weird horror camp movies are going to enjoy. So it's like, I mean, I definitely, for me personally, I would probably give Dead Snow a 7.5, the same as 30 Days of Night, which, like I said, depending on what you give it, I know we're going to probably discussion, but like I said, that's probably why I wanted to say the 7.5,
yeah,
because in reality, the Dead Snow isn't a better movie than that. So I gave it 7.5, and I gave 30 Days of Night 7.5. That's just because of like how much of like this type of filming I like more than that Hollywood budget clean. Where, like I said, I mean, I enjoy that movie, and it's got the likability, and I gave it a 7.5 because the fact 30 Days of Night is going to be more of what general horror fans are gonna like versus Dead Snow. But for
yeah,
me personally, I think Dead Snow, I think, is a more fun movie.
for sure. I'm definitely cool with the 7.5 for you with it, man. I'm cool with that. Because it is exactly how you described it. It's two stylistically different movies, and I'm not talking about vampires, zombies, high budget, low budget, literally stylistic. It's, you've got a specific straight up concept movie in 30 Days of Night. You know, vampires animalistically feeding on humans, knowing that they have a shit ton of time to do it that they don't normally have. versus, Dead Snow, which is closer to like a tribute or interpretation of that style of campiness. And again, it would be interesting to have done a more budget friendly comparison. But there's so much charm to Dead Snow that, you've got all of those references. And like I said, so much fun. Like you and I, we love our camp. We love fun movies. This Dead Snow brings me back to these other camp fests that I'm a huge fan of in movies like Dead and Breakfast, Dead Alive, stuff like that, where, you've got scenes where like, a person's just eating porridge and their fucking ear falls in the porridge, and instead of doing anything about it, they just pick it up in a scoop and it's their next bite. And you're just like, wait, what? Like, how is that even a thing? Like, who writes that? But there's so much fun overall to it. So I'm definitely with you, brother. I definitely think that it's cool. I think a solid 7.5 for Dead Snow because of what it is, because of what it represents, and just the sheer fun factor of it. I do think it's proper. I do think it's good. Again, that does put us in a tie, so we have to do a little discussion real quick when it does come to it. And you kind of already touched on it, and I'm kind of going to echo what you said because I do believe it to be that way. Overall, I do think the win does go to 30 Days of Night simply because of the specific design. And like we talk about every episode, if not every episode, the common populace. It's the older generation or the unique style of horror fans that are really going to get attached to Dead Snow. The bigger chunk of horror fans, as well as horror fans that are coming up, whether it's because of their parents or their brother or sister, is more likely going to gravitate, again, to the casting and simply the sharp appeal of 30 Days of Night that I don't think is going to come across strong enough from Dead Snow. I'm talking about just right off the bat. When it comes to Dead Snow, it's about, sitting down and getting to watch it and seeing if it's your cup of tea or, much more of that cult design, build up. The people that love it are passionate for it. I just think the budget, the concept, and the overall general look mixed with the casting, it's just stronger for 30 Days of Night. So I do think that the dial gets, clicked to 30 Days of Night personally. But what do you think, man?
I definitely agree with you on that. Like I said, that's why I was saying, like, I feel like, if you pull 100 horror fans and they can be from, all from old school heads to new heads, the majority of people are probably gonna more than likely pick 30 Days of Night just because it's the cleaner movie, it's the bigger budget, it's got the more Hollywoodistic. Now granted, if you pulled, at least 50 or 60% of that 100 people were, old heads, yeah, you might be able to sway them. They might sway it to Dead Snow versus, but in general, I think most horror fans are probably gonna sway towards 30 Days of Night. But then again, it comes to a question when we're talking about, we always talk about sequels and
Yep.
and things like that too, where maybe we got to put that into play too with this, where 30 Days of Night might beat Dead Snow 1 originally. And let's just say, in the world, everybody's going to vote for, would go for that movie or go for that. But then, we talk about sequels a lot in this, and we talk about, and with both of these movies both having sequels, maybe that could even go into play too a little bit, where, 30 Days of Night sequel was horrible, and Dead Snow 2 is such a good sequel, and it continues on with that, maybe Dead Snow might pull a little bit of the win just because the fact that it does have two movies that are enjoyable versus one movie that was really enjoyable. So it almost poses the question is you know, does your franchise tag team partner help out a little bit on these showdowns?
It's definitely not a bad direction to go, Devil. I like where your head's at for that. I do think it's a very quality point to make for sure. I do think that I'll tell you, man, it's a really, really excellent point. It really is. But I will say that I do think also the strength of just general knowledge of the movie 30 Days of Night is also, I think, a little stronger than the knowledge of the movie DeadSnow.
Yeah,
Again,
yeah.
I think the bigger overall populace of horror fans, again, are going to be much more aware also of 30 Days of Night than they're likely to be for DeadSnow. So I do think something like that can even play into account too. Because also, I love the fact that with both of these being a 2-movie franchise, that's a really good point about like where, the overall franchise of 30 Days of Night took a step down, where the overall franchise of DeadSnow took a step up, but there is also a point of just putting it out because it's a concept and a general knowledge that sequels in general don't have an overall good track record just across the genre. So it's definitely tricky on that, and I love that you brought that up, but like that's a really, really excellent point, and definitely I definitely think that's something that will come up now a lot more regularly in a lot of our discussions. I do still feel that it's a squeaker for 30. But what do you think, man?
Yeah,
I think it's going to be. I think this is clearly our closest, and we said that recently of a really good one. But this is clearly our closest. My gut is still, personalities outside of this. My gut is it's just giving me a little bit more for 30.
Yeah, so I want to pose you this question, and if you still feel that same way, I mean, I'm 100% cool with giving 30 Days of Night the win. So do you feel that IP plays a bigger role on that, where 30 Days of Night has that IP value of it? Like when you talk about movies like these people that make these Marvel movies, of course Marvel movies are gonna blow up and be
Yeah.
huge. It's fucking Marvel.
Mhm.
Walking Dead, of course Walking Dead was gonna be, is gonna be big. It's from an IP. So do you feel that 30 Days of Night, because you saying about, the popularity of it and stuff like that, do you feel that if it wasn't based off a graphic novel to begin with, that people would turn to it as much as Dead Snow, and because of the originality versus that IP level?
That's really quality as well. I don't necessarily think that, no, only because, like, for me personally, I'm not a graphic novel guy, really. Like, I'm not like, I like comic books as much as the next person. I like graphic novels as much as the next person, but I'm a super casual fan when it comes to that kind of stuff. I went to go see 30 Days of Night because it was this cool looking, back when I watched trailers, it was this cool looking vampire movie that taking place in Alaska. Um, so I was excited to go see like the new vampire movie in the theaters. I personally learned about the graphic novel honestly afterwards. So, and that's just speaking for me. I definitely think something like that is valid because you're absolutely going to have fans that went more for 30 Days of Night because they're aware of its history versus Dead Snow has that independent feel where people can discover it or get turned on to it, and it's its own kind of thing. I just do think that 30 Days has strength as its own thing outside of the graphic novel, simply because I'm an example of that.
Yeah.
But that's,
I guess I definitely agree with you, because I mean, especially at the time the 30 Days of Night came out, not saying, like with Walking Dead, that being a graphic novel and stuff like that, and people know that. Not that people weren't reading comic books and knew about graphic novels. I think the popularity of graphic novel movies now is a little bit more popular versus that time of 30 Days of Night when it wasn't as big.
Yeah.
A prime example of that is Blade. How
Yeah.
many people love Blade that honestly for probably 30 years didn't even know that Blade was a Marvel movie to begin with.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's so many people that didn't know that that was based off of a Marvel comic. Even when you see the movie in the original, watch it, watch the original one. It has the Marvel logo in the very beginning of the movie. Yeah, it's not the Marvel Studio logo that you get now with the dun 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 dun, dun with the
The,
Avengers and all
yeah,
that shit.
the big
But it was before all those movies came around. But yeah, it was definitely a thing. So I agree with you. I think that IP definitely does play a factor. Maybe not nearly as much in this showdown versus some other ones, but I was just but yeah, I'll definitely agree with you with the 30 Days of Night. I think, like I said, I don't think that it gave it enough of a bump for the IP. I think a little bit might go just because some people, but there's probably people that probably not. 30 Days of Night graphic novel was big, but it was never that huge. It wasn't a huge graphic novel versus like Walking Dead or any of the Marvel comics and stuff like that. So I feel like it didn't play that much. So I definitely, I'll give a 30 Days of Night that little edge.
Yeah. No, for sure. If 30 Days of Night came out 10 years later, same cast, everything was identical. Or for the sake of a slightly younger actor, you know, but everything was exactly the same. The guy had the same acting chops and everything was presented the exact same way. I definitely think that that's an excellent point. Does the comic book history appeal give it that boost? I
Yeah.
think that 30 Days of Night, like, just avoided it. Like just dodged out of the way. Where, like you said, I'm sure there's plenty of people that saw the movie and were familiar with its history. Um, and plenty of people like myself that were unaware of its history. They just thought it was the cool new vampire movie. So it definitely rides that line, but I think it did have the advantage of like just you know just being ahead of the big bubble explosion where comic books were becoming so well known, to be playing into major feature films. So I definitely love that point. I think 30 Days of Night though just kind of lucked out when it came to that one for sure. But dude, Fangs, Infernos, hope you enjoyed this one because I know that we sure did. This one was awesome, and man was it close. But by a fucking vampire, Fang. 30 Days of Night squeaks out the victory over DeadSnow as a 7.5 to a 7.5, but just the agreed upon edge goes to 30 Days of Night for budget, overall design, and just general common populace. But make sure you guys are definitely going out and checking out DeadSnow and taking advantage of the sequel as well of Dead Not in Snow. But so that's the way we are going to rank it, guys, for this one. DeadSnow, 30 Days of Night. Victory goes to the vampire. Fatality on the devil. Man, was that a close one, though, as that stake went whizzing right by my anatomy. But that's the way it's going to be, Fangs. So 30 Days of Night gets the edge over DeadSnow. As always, myself and the devil, we want to give a lot of love and thanks and appreciation to all our beloved partners and sponsors of the Vampire and Devil podcast. Horns up. Horns up. Fangs out for a great one.
All right, Fangs, I got a brand new Coffin Nails for you, and I'm actually pretty stoked to talk about this one. Let's go back to 2019 and let's discuss Bliss. Stars Dora Madison, who, if you are familiar with from various episodes of the Vampire and Devil podcast, she was also in Christmas Bloody Christmas. But here she stars as Desi. She's basically a struggling artist. Everything's going wrong for her. Her landlord's hounding her for the rent. The curator of this art gallery, who's put up a lot of money to feature her in this show, is hounding her for the big focal center, big masterpiece that she's supposed to unveil in only a few days. You know, her agent's an asshole and treats her like shit and doesn't really believe in her. And so basically everything's just kind of going wrong, and she's, you know, that starving artist. She's going out with friends. She's trying to figure out her next move, and she starts experimenting with a lot of psychedelic drugs, ultimately leading into this drug known as bliss. It's really not that far off from cocaine. But it's a really, really interesting thing as the drug is used more and kicks in more into your system, that's how it starts changing you. And she starts waking up covered in blood. She's killing people. She doesn't really realize what's going on, and she has no memory of all these things happening. She sees, like, you know, visuals of like her friend like killing people and other things like that, but she doesn't really have any answers for these, as of course when she wakes up kind of sobering up, they're not even around. And so she's trying to figure everything out about like how to do this kind of thing. It is a psychedelic style movie. There's a lot of free love in this movie. It's definitely not, you know, there's by no means are they afraid of nudity in this movie. But overall, it's very, very cool. I thought it was a very unique take on this movie, even down to like various kills. Like the stakings in this movie, when you stake the vampire, it's not that far off from when somebody would explode into ash, but their take on it was they would melt away, kind of like wax from a dying candle. And I found that to be a very, very unique take. And then ultimately it ends in a climactic, you know, psychedelic kind of infused like orgy of what's happening now versus what's really happening, and then ultimately leads in Desi's death due to sunlight at her own choice. But I'm going to rank this kind of high. I really enjoyed it. It's a 7.5 on this edition of Vampire's Coffin Nails for Bliss. Devil, my friend. Fashion. Things to wear. Possibly faces covered, but more importantly, covering up the bodies. Merch. We have that now. We are very, very excited to announce that Vampire and the Devil have partnered with our friends at Rockin' Horror Apparel. They are now taking care of the actual merch, the exclusive merch for the Vampire and Devil podcast, modeled by our very sexy devil right here.
Oh, yeah.
But we have all kinds of goodies to share with you.
Got the hoodies. We got some shirts. We got some tanks coming up. We got some booty shorts. We got all the stuff you want to wear. From the Vampire and Devil podcast, thanks to Rockin' Horror.
Horns up, fangs out. Ghouls and fangs, Vampire and the Devil here. We got a little question for you. Devil, there's kind of a triangle, a three-headed monster per se, when it comes to Baltimore, that I don't think people necessarily realize. We've got Edgar Allan Poe, we've got John Waters, but what else do we have?
We got the Ouija boards, oh yeah.
Absolutely. Starting in Baltimore way back in the day, a lot of people are unfamiliar with William Fuld and Elijah Bond, who patented, and the birth of the Ouija board was right here in Baltimore. Devil and Vampire coming at you from the Witchboard Museum of Baltimore, courtesy of our friend John Kozik, who invited us out to check it out and shoot a little conversation action to let you guys all know. Of course, you've seen on our socials that we have partnered with both museums, and we couldn't be more appreciative to John for that opportunity. So whenever you're here in Baltimore, of course, right attached to the Bizarre Oddity Shop off of the Avenue, you have Witchboard Museum Baltimore. And when you're in Witch City, USA, up in Salem, Massachusetts, that's when you get to visit the Salem Witchboard Museum.
Oh yeah, if you want to see some cool stuff, see some cool boards, get some cool history, go see our boy John. Man, that guy is really awesome, man. That dude knows his boards, he knows his history, he's about preserving the society of witch boards and the talking boards and all that goodness. And, you know, we love it. We love the fact that, you know, they were going to bring in this museum here in Baltimore, so all the Baltimore fans or all your East Coast fans or maybe not as far away, going up to Salem, come out to Baltimore and check it out, you know what I mean? Because there's some cool stuff in this museum, and you got to check it out because the devil and the vampire said so.
That is facts right there, my friend. Again, absolutely attached to the Bizarre Oddities shop in the Avenue in Hamden for the Baltimore established Witchboard Museum. We're off of Essex Street in Salem, Massachusetts for the Salem Witchboard Museum. Horns up, fangs out.